Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Coming up tonight on Our News, the Defense Force prepares for an early election as the date is still unknown. Why there may be power cuts ahead for New Providence. A man found dead as the top story of a building goes up in flames. And Sweeting's Key residents work on rebuilding their lives nearly 2 years after Hurricane Dorian. Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, a Royal Bahamas Defense Force memo directing department heads to provide a list of Marines voting in the advance poll for the upcoming general election has fueled speculation that Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis plans to call an early election. Jared Higgs tells us more.
Despite that speculation, National Security Minister Marvin Dames today insisting the public should not read too much into that memo, as it is customary for the RBDF to make advanced preparations for elections.
Only one person can decide that. Only one person. And that is the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
The memo, dated April 29th, reads, in preparation for the possibility of an early general election, you are directed to provide a listing of all personnel in your purview voting in the advance poll and forward the same to the Base Executive Officer's office by Thursday, May 6. Dames denied that he instructed the RBDF to conduct the exercise.
I won't read too deeply into that, as I said before. This is a normal occurrence, and I don't think you should be reading too deeply into that either. Only one person will determine the date of the election, and he hasn't yet done so.
In recent weeks, many, including members of the Progressive Liberal Party, have speculated that Minnis is gearing up to call an early election. However, in March, the Prime Minister said calling an election is not a decision he plans to make on his own.
Everybody's speculating, again, okay? But as far as I know and as far as I'm aware, this is not out of the ordinary. And I don't think that we should make a big show or a big deal out of it. Prime Minister makes that decision, and when he does, want to make certain that these agencies are ready in advance.
The Free National Movement, PLP, and Democratic National Alliance are quickly moving to ratify candidates. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Fuel contamination at Bahamas Power and Light could result in power outages across New Providence. Kyle Joaquin has the story.
We are hoping that there are no challenges and outages. Well, I think as a precaution, BPL has to advise the public.
The minister responsible for BPL today addressing concerns over major outages across New Providence stemming from issues with fuel logistics. In a statement Monday evening, BPL said Bahamas Power and Light Company Limited confirms that we are experiencing issues with fuel logistics at the Blue Hills Power Plant. The service provider in question, Sun Oil Limited, has assured that all necessary steps are being taken to remedy the matter, and we are working jointly to stabilize the power supply while corrective actions are implemented. BPL went on to say until the solutions are fully implemented, some customers may experience short outages.
There's the batch of fuel that came in recently that BPL suspects was contaminated. It's not provided by BPL, it's provided by suppliers. Okay? When BPL used this fuel, it caused some challenges with their engines.
Bannister says that contaminated fuel then sent the power company into another round of repairing and replacing parts, including filters.
They have to get the fuel out of their engines and be able to get more fuel in quickly.
Still no price tag on the cost of the damage done. According to the minister, BPL is now working with the supplier to get fuel that is not contaminated. Until then, you may experience brief outages.
If there's outages, they'll be short, they'll be in isolated areas, but we don't anticipate that there's going to be any widespread outages.
Bannister says he expects the financial issues brought on by the challenge to be worked out. But he says the biggest concern right now comes as we approach summer, when demand for electricity is high and power outages are sometimes frequent. So how will summer look for BPL?
Everybody was home in the pandemic, burning air conditioning in their houses. And BP, we didn't have the kind of challenges we had in summers past. So we're anticipating the same kind of summer. We just have to work through this challenge.
Now, we reached out to BPL's chairman as well as the PR director. However, we were informed that the company has nothing further to add at this time. For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Well, an early morning blaze on 7th Terrace and Fritz Lane leaves a man dead and several others homeless. Bethany McDermott has the details in this report.
Residents who once lived in these apartments now left sifting through the rubble to see what can be recovered. Police say the fire broke out around 3 a.m. on 7th Terrace and Fritz Lane. Upon arrival, they met the top level of a two-story structure in flames.
The units responded, and on their arrival, they met a two-story structure engulfed in flames. The officers proceeded to extinguish the fire. And shortly after 6 a.m., the fire was extinguished, and they made a search of the building and discovered the body of charred remains of an unidentified body outside the bathroom door.
Police have yet to officially identify the man, but residents say he is Cy Cowbell. A church and 4 businesses were impacted by the blaze. Judith Clinton and her family lived in one of the apartments. Her family of 10 lost everything, including their essential documents.
When I get up, I smell the smoke, and I go into the window, I say, I smell smoke. Where is smoke coming from? Then after that, I heard my brother say, get up, get up, get up, a fire in the place.
According to Peters, arson is not suspected in this matter. After safely escaping the fire, Clinton says efforts were made to assist their neighbors, but there was one life they couldn't save.
The gentleman would die. We couldn't really do nothing for him because that fire coming from his room. So ain't nothing we could do. So only thing we do but try to call everybody, and everybody survived, but him, I'm very sorry. We couldn't help him, but I wish we could help him.
The Rasta fella, he tried to get upstairs. My daughter tried to get upstairs to see if they could get him out, but no one could get him out. Then Chris comes, so I said, Chris, you all go see what you could do with Cy. But we couldn't do nothing.
Now we're standing in Clinton's home, which as you can see was burnt unrecognizable, as she and her family go through the rubble to see what they can salvage. We asked her what's next for them, but that's a question she couldn't answer.
We don't know. We don't know yet. No.
Police are advising residents to take steps to prevent fires. Reporting for Our News, I'm Bethany McDermott.
Social services officials say they've already reached out to the victims of this morning's deadly blaze, as well as those who lost their homes in Sunday's fire. However, as Giorgio Bain tells us, the minister responsible says residents should not rely solely on government for help.
Temporary housing has been provided for some 13 residents, according to Social Services Minister Frankie Campbell, but they must comply with filing an official report on what was lost during the fire so that further assistance can be given.
There are some persons who feel like they need not answer questions when they are seeking assistance. That is necessary. We need to document. At the end of the day, we in the department need to give an account for the funds that we have. And so there must be some paper trail.
The Social Services Minister says those affected cannot rely on the government to help them rebuild, as the structures were not government owned. He encouraged residents to consider insuring homes no matter how expensive it may seem.
And I know the thought of insurance is expensive, but there are options for insurance. There are options for contents. There are options for just your roof. There are options that need to be considered. But if we expect in every incident that the government will make us whole, that is not realistic.
As for how long that short-term assistance may last, Campbell said this.
I'm not giving any time frame. Politicians get in trouble giving time frames for things that other people do. And then when other people don't, the politician is made out to be a liar.
However, PLP candidate Lisa Raming tells Our News that the government isn't doing enough to assist residents.
This requires a national address by the Prime Minister of this country. Not one or two persons was affected. We're talking about a plethora of individuals who are displaced, not only with a job, but with everything.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Well, fake vaccination cards are a global concern, according to Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar. The concern arising now that the Bahamas has removed the testing requirement for fully vaccinated travelers.
Certainly in the United States, where over 90% of our foreign visitors originate, persons are getting vaccinated in many different areas, many different municipalities, many different states, and all of them have a mechanism by which to report that you have been vaccinated. So that obviously is creating some difficulty. We're trying to work through that and what would be the best solution. I guess the world is looking at this. Everybody's looking at this.
Locally, police have arrested and charged several people for possessing fake RT-PCR test results. Penalties range from fines to jail time. D'Aguilar says officials are working to develop a higher level of scrutiny.
There's been talk of a COVID passport and some sort of electronic means. We're obviously grappling with this issue. But for the time being, we think that the records that people are presenting are genuine, and we're just developing a mechanism on how best to validate that.
Partly sunny skies in the capital today. Our Greg Thompson is in the Weather Center with the latest.
Thanks, Christina. I'm meteorologist Greg Thompson with your first look at weather. Beautiful evening setting up. A little bit on a breezy side. Temperatures are in the mid to upper 70s. Once again, 77 outside our studios. We call it just a few clouds. Warm. And of course, your feels like temperature. Very warm, 77 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside. Satellite view, another quiet day around the island. Some patchy clouds moving across the area. But all in all, it should be a very nice evening. Maybe an isolated sprinkle, but things will remain quiet for the rest of the evening. That's your first look at weather. Your extended forecast is still to come.
Still to come on our news, remembering the victims of the HMBS Flamingo 41 years later. And our Jillian Gray has the stories of survival on Sweetings Key when our news returns.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic.
The 41st anniversary of the deadly attack on the HMBS Flamingo is just days away. In remembrance of the fallen 4 officers, the RBDF unveiled their portraits in Rawson Square this afternoon. Our Jasmine Brown tells us more.
They say time heals all wounds, but for the family members of the 4 Marines who lost their lives aboard the HMBS Flamingo 41 years ago, the passage of time has done nothing to dull the memories of the men they called sons, fathers, brothers, and uncles.
Their life was definitely a sacrifice, and as I was speaking to someone else, we were saying it's amazing every year we go through the same emotions again. You think that you're strong enough, that it's been 41 years and you're able to handle it, but the emotions come up.
In the beginning it was rough, but like everything else in life, as time goes on, things are not as rough and it's not as hurtful.
That's sisters of Marine Seaman David Allison Tucker and Marine Seaman Edward Williams describing how the tragedy still impacts their families. The men, along with 2 other Marines, including able Seaman Fenric Stirrup and Marine Seaman Austin Rudolph Smith, were killed on May 10, 1980, when the HMBS Flamingo ship, after it was attacked by Cuban military fighter jets en route to Key Santo Domingo with Cuban poachers on board. The sisters of able Seaman Stirrup say they can still recall the moment they got the tragic news.
I was at home, but my rest of my sisters and those, they were at church. My mother was home as well.
That day I was in Christ the King Anglican Church when they called me out and gave me the news. And when I started my piece of screaming, everybody came out of the church.
Family members were present as the RBDF unveiled portraits in Rawson Square.
This is something that's uniquely special, in that we want to unveil the portraits to allow primarily for the education of the Bahamian public once more concerning the sacrifice and service.
We try to do our best to support the Defense Force and all their initiatives and what they do to keep the memory alive of the 4 young men that died.
I think it's a huge honor for the family. I think it's a huge honor for the Bahamas as well, you know, to let them know their history, to let people know that you have people sacrificing themselves for this entire country.
Now, the family members we spoke to today say one thing is certain, and that's the fact that their fallen loved ones' memories will live on. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, the residents of Sweetings Key are rebuilding their lives. Our Jillian Gray visited the community today.
That's right, Christina. It's been 2 years since Hurricane Dorian, and the evidence of how the monster storm tore through the island is still very visible. We saw tents, tarps, and trash still piled high. And even some 2 years later, residents say they're still waiting on help from the government.
Well, the DRA, I haven't received anything from the DRA, so I really don't know what's going on with that. It's like, as far as the government consistent of building homes like that or fixing them, I haven't seen that yet.
We met Leonard Feaster tending to his conch pit. He was one of 13 men who rode out the storm on the island. He's currently living in a tent while rebuilding his restaurant.
Money is moving slow, so that's what my employees going down. The boat work is slow. The fishermen lost all the traps and stuff like that. Some of them ain't get no engine, not yet, no boat, not yet. So
riding in, we saw homes under construction on the shoreline. Just beside them, the ruins of another home lay as a reminder of the devastation. Gladstone Russell was painting his home when we came in, the exposed sheetrock and new roof signaling a new day for him and his family.
That's where the water mark was. I stand inside there, in front from there, and look at the water, even with this window here, even white seas.
Wow. And you were in there with your family?
I'm standing up looking at it, looking through the window at the water.
Wow. So when it actually came inside, how high was it to you?
Water came up here, under my neck.
While Selma Tate did not stay on the island during the hurricane, her husband did. She says it was hard returning to her battered home, but she is thankful for life.
A portion of the roof was totally gone, but coming back home to Sweetings Key, it was like something I've never experienced. But the good thing for me was about knowing that when I come here, my husband was still safe and alive, and that there was no life lost in Sweetings Key.
Despite everything, residents count themselves as resilient and say even if another storm comes, Sweetings Key will always be their home. Reporting for our news from Sweetings Key, I'm Jillian Gray.
Thanks, Jillian. When our news comes back from the break, demolition on the farm shanty town on Abaco continues, and the Bahamas scores a basketball tournament. The details when our news returns.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic.
This is our news. Welcome back. The government is set to begin the third phase of demolition in the farm shanty town on Abaco this week, according to Public Works Minister Desmond Bannister. This as Fred Smith QC urges government to stop until an ongoing judicial review on the matter is resolved in the Supreme Court.
The second phase was to get in there with those 50 structures that we demolished. We're going into the third phase this week. Thursday makes 28 days. We couldn't go into occupied structures until 28 days have passed. And so we are going into the third phase beginning this week. Our people are mobilized and ready to do what they have to do.
Bannister says the demolition has nothing to do with the current court matter. Rather, he says government is tearing down new structures that went up despite a court order instructing otherwise.
There's an injunction against building any structures that's been in place for almost 2 years. So how do we get hundreds of houses, hundreds of structures that people are living in violation of the law? And then if they sit there, believe me, if they sit there for a couple of years, they're going to be able to go to the Supreme Court and get certificates of title to that land and own that land. You as a Bahamian can't do that.
Well, the Bahamas is set to play host to another top-notch basketball tournament. Marcellus Hall tells us more.
All right, thanks, Christina, and welcome to our sports, everybody. I'm Marcellus Hall. Despite the pandemic, the Bahamas continues to be a very much interesting place as far as people wanting to host major sporting events here. The latest coming your way this coming November with another basketball tournament set to make its debut. After a 3-year planning phase, the Legacy Jam Fest will take place here in New Providence this fall, November 27th through the 30th. Co-organizer Jeff Rogers is excited about what's ahead.
Myself and Julius, we've been working on this now for the past 2 years, and to have 4 of the top HBCU schools to play in a basketball tournament here in the Bahamas, and knowing the tough times out there right now, so economically we think this is a great fit for the Bahamas, not only just for basketball, but to bring some of the other sporting events here to the Bahamas: baseball, football, track and field. All of these different events we're hoping to launch every other quarter here in the Bahamas.
Rogers adding that the tournament stands to have a big impact on the Bahamian economy as well.
Think about it. Right after the Battle for Atlantis, the very next day, this event kick off. So the timing is perfect, and again, where the tourism numbers are down, this is going to be Thanksgiving weekend. This will be like a big boost, for tourism, and we know, again, Atlantis is so excited about this initiative, and so this would be great for the country, and we need it. And that's the whole focus about sports tourism, to be able to create events that's going to bring numbers to the Bahamas. We call it heads and beds.
Norfolk State, Hampton University, Morgan State, and Texas Southern are the schools set to attend this year's inaugural tournament. And there it is, your check on sports for you this Tuesday. I'm Marcellus Hall. Back to you, Christina.
Thanks, Marcellus. Well, there may be a few showers ahead, plus balancing motherhood and mental health. That's coming up when our news returns.
Welcome to our news, and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic.
Welcome back to our news. More sunny skies may be ahead. Greg has the details in the Weather Center.
Thanks again, Christina. On this Tuesday evening, very nice conditions on the outside. That high pressure ridge remains entrenched across the area. That's generating some very warm temperatures across the area. Quiet weather. Nothing much in terms of rainfall. We do have a little bit of a weak disturbance just to the north of the Bahamas. That will continue to zip out towards the east. But that high pressure will remain in charge of our weather over the next several days. And once again, as I mentioned, summer-like temperatures expected and very little in terms of rainfall before the weekend. Boating conditions for the northwest and central Bahamas tonight through tomorrow. Your winds will be out of the southeast to south, 10 to 15 knot seas running 2 to 4 feet over the ocean. While in the southeast Bahamas, winds are slightly stronger, east to southeast, 15 knots, seas running 3 to 5 feet. Your low tide will be at 9:34 tonight. Here's a look now at your national forecast. A look now at your extended forecast through Sunday. That's a look at our weather. Make it a safe night, everybody. Back to you, Christina.
Thanks, Greg. Lockdowns and social distancing have had an untold impact on families, and no one knows that more than mothers. Tonight, as we continue celebrating mothers, we take a look at the impact the pandemic has had on motherhood and mental health. Therapist and founder of Mental Health Counseling Bahamas, Sion Edwards, says your mental health is your emotional well-being, how you feel and cope with the emotional stress of your day-to-day life.
The huge stigma that goes with mental health is people correlate it with mental illness. Now, mental illness is completely different. It's a part of mental health, meaning that mental illnesses are disorders. So everyone has mental health, but not everyone has a mental illness.
Edwards says mental health took a hit during the pandemic as many mothers found themselves stretched thin.
You took on all of those roles being a mother. You're now the teacher, the coach, the nanny, the cook, everything.
Between social distancing and working from home, Edwards says there will be some sort of impact on your emotional well-being. That's where a mental health check comes in.
Whether that might be a facial, whether that might be eating to your favorite restaurant, something that's just for you.
What about helping those mothers who are afraid to ask for help?
The small things make all the difference. Like if you could run an errand for a mother, if you can run to the pharmacy, pick up medication, get some groceries, leave a hot meal on the doorstep, anything.
Edward says it is essential for parents and mothers in particular to take time out for themselves. And while her top recommendation is to speak to a therapist, she recognizes not everyone can afford one. The Bahamas Psychological Association offers a free hotline for anyone in need. Tune in tomorrow for part 3 of our Celebrating Mothers series. Well, thank you for joining us for our news tonight. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Christina Dragovich. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas. A new episode of Broke Bosses is coming up next.